Welcome to the Weekly Workplace Podcast, your hub for leveling up your workplace skills with a journey to success that's anything but boring. Get ready to ditch the dull and dive into the dynamic. Imagine high fives and fist bumps for triumphing over frontline challenges and confetti cannons for nailing your leadership goals. Our episodes feature interviews with industry game changers, spicy tips from trailblazing pros, and mind-blowing techniques to turn you into the office superhero you were meant to be. So, whether you're rocking the cubicle life or leading from the corner office, grab your cape and get ready to soar to new heights with the Weekly Workplace.
Welcome to the Weekly Workplace, where professionals come to find insights and inspiration for success. With you today,
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. We're going to have to lean on our genius of invention to maybe come up with a new way to do our introductions. Oh, you guys, it's good to be back with you again today.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's good to see everybody.
It is. It is. Ray? Wait, you look like you want to say something.
I'm just waiting because I know you're going to ask me a bunch of questions. So I was like, I don't want to give it away yet.
I know. Yes. So we are very excited to tap into Miss Ray today and her genius of invention. If you've been following along with us, we are now walking through each of the 6 types of working geniuses. And so we're on genius number 2. This genius of invention is really that point where we've now have the questions being asked, and now we have our genius of invention come in and say, that's a good question. Let me try to solve it. And then coming up with as many different ideas as they possibly can to solve the question that's been posed. Right?
How annoying is that?
It's not annoying
Not
at all.
Oh.
No, it's often where the greatest ideas come from, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh,
Absolutely. And so, Ray, this did not surprise me at all that you had this as one of your geniuses. How did you feel seeing it on your report?
Yes, I loved it. I love the idea of inventor, as a moniker. And, my idea of invention started like when I was little, I was really into fashion. But I wouldn't wear that as you wear that. Like I would
put a pair of pants on your head and call it a scarf.
or like misbutton it and then tuck it in a different way or wear it backwards or, do something that took that to another level. And I mean, my undergraduate was in fashion design merchandising.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That explains a lot, doesn't it?
It does now. Yeah, I'm envisioning like Ray with Barbie. Did you have Barbie dolls like that were?
I was more,
No. You were too busy inventing things beyond the Barbie dolls.
Yeah. I dressed my horse up.
Oh, wow.
Like
very inventive there.
Huh.
So let me ask you, I gave you kind of the 6 types of working genius definition of invention. How do you define it though?
I do. And originally when I was thinking about like, what is the difference? Because they're both in that ideation space. And, Dewey comes with the gift of wonder. And I was like, what's the difference between wonder and invention? And in my mind, I see invention taking something that's been spoken, even if it's in the form of a question, and all of a sudden, sparks are going off. So it might not be the original question that blows up the thought, but it's taking all of those and seeing how I can make something out of that.
It seems like, and this is obviously because invention is not my working genius, but that seems daunting sometimes. Does it ever get tiring for you, or how do you maximize your energy in that space?
It doesn't get tiring for me. What gets tiring for me is having to regulate it for others.
Okay.
Okay. Zip. I mean, you both know I love change just for change's sake. And that's not good with our goals. And so sometimes I'm like, it doesn't need to be new tomorrow,
Yeah.
I'll wait another day.
Yeah.
I'll give her till Friday. Yeah.
Oh, I move a little slower than you do, I think, in that space.
I need that,
though.
I mean, that's the beauty. Like,
I can't tell you how many times I've been in a meeting with Ray and we're talking and you just see the light bulbs just pop right up on top of her head like, yes. And And she, you notice she says that a lot, right? She goes, yes, and, coming up with those new ideas. Yeah.
Yeah. I just remember the time we were in your office, Dewey, and the chart paper came out, and like, she's just up there just scribbling all over the chart paper. There's multiple pieces of chart paper. And I'm like, man, she's really going after this. And so let me ask you, and I think I posed this question last week to Dewey, when you're thinking about what you really crave, to honor that genius of invention, what do you crave?
The idea has to come from something. And so, I crave other people. That's what I crave. I crave, I'm going to say it in the form that also serves another part of my person, but an audience. Because I think there's that element of like novelty and shock and awe and, wonder, but not from the perspective of, questions, but just like, whoa, and so I kind of crave that reflection.
Yeah, I can see that even tapping in, because your second working genius is galvanizing. And so that combination, the energy, the emotion, the passion, the excitement that you kind of need, I can see that crossover between invention and galvanizing. So much energy. And we talk about that a lot about you, Ray. Like, so much energy packed into Ray. Like,
can you imagine being my mother? Like, oh, that poor woman.
Oh, no, not at all.
I often got, like, can't sit in her own seat. I had to be like, but I was always trying to improve on what people were doing. And,
So what's interesting, and what I just heard you say there is, I was always getting in trouble for not staying in my own seat, or, and I also know this is part of your true color, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But when I talk to other folks who have the genius of invention, they often say they crave the idea of freedom.
Oh, that is one of my top values.
Okay.
And yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And how do you see that kind of playing out in the workplace? Like, how do you, because you're a leader, you've also been a frontline employee though, like, how do you tangibly deliver on that freedom?
Well, like freedom to speak. I mean, literally, and you guys are beautiful in, letting me have that stage, if you will, and freedom to make my own choices, so what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do it and when I'm going to do it, so if I can't pick all of them, which ones do I get? So I think there's a lot of freedoms just in the role. I think that also is freedom that comes with being a leader. And going into a space that might be new, because it's like, I got you. Like, just come on, I got you. Yeah. Even today when we crossed the street, I was like, come on.
You really did, yeah.
I was like, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. So that to me is freedom.
I wondered though, because I bet you've been in situations where you were working with a team or an organization where there were so many rules and so many processes and so many guidelines and things like that. Does that limit your freedom then to think of new?
It only limits my freedom for the amount of time that I put myself there, because I'm done in those spaces. And I've been in literally, I can't. I literally can't contain myself in those spaces. So, I mean, when somebody's telling you how to park your car, like, I'm just like, no. So then I intentionally park it a different way. Like, I can't, one of my bosses, he pushed all the chairs in after we left the meeting, and I'd go and I'd pull them all out. Like, I just can't be contained.
We're going to get you a t-shirt that says that. I just can't be contained.
That's a great motto.
It is.
I mean, the sidewalks would part, like,
So let's talk about that a little bit then. I'm hearing a lot, the containment component being maybe something you're crushed by. What else would you define maybe being crushed by in terms of that genius of invention?
Not being heard.
Yeah.
That's, so it's almost like another thing that drives me. But then when we're not allowed to be in that space of creativity or invention, like.
How do you get along with the naysayers?
Sometimes I just ignore them. Like, I just block them out.
Yeah.
Like, part of my my confidence probably carries me beyond the naysayers. There's probably a little bit of trying to prove that otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think, part of that crush is not getting it right, not getting it adopted, not getting it,
When you got a great idea and you know it's
Yeah.
going to work and it doesn't, and nobody's going to give you the space to get it accomplished. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that
That
makes
would be
sense.
crushing.
It would be. Yeah. And I often hear, I think the biggest thing that our genius of invention say they're crushed by is the constraint. So in all of those areas and the ways that you've just mentioned, like I still sense that as constraint. So obviously opposite of freedom there. And so you are spending a lot of time creating all of these ideas. And so to not see something come to fruition. And so I'm sitting here reflecting as we're having this conversation, because next week we're going to talk about the third genius being discernment. And so in those spaces, and I'm thinking about team meetings where you've come up with all of these great ideas, right? And Dewey and I both have the genius of discernment, and then we start kind of whittling them down. How can we better serve you in those spaces so that we're not crushing that genius of invention?
I feel like if I'm feel listened to, in all of that, then I recognize that I might not always have the ability to focus and make that movement. But if I feel like I've been listened to and you've looked at all of my crazy options, and even for a fleeting moment, considered it, then when it comes time to like, wow, yeah, these three things and, we're going with number one or whatever, or this idea or that idea if it's not mine. But if I feel like I've been heard and I've been allowed to invent and create and blurt, I am an external processor. So, and you guys know, and I don't mean everything I say, but I'm thinking all these ideas. So I'm like almost building the plane while I'm flying. And so just because I said it doesn't mean that's what I'm doing or that's what we need to do. It's just, it's another way to get somewhere creatively.
I'm learning here because I'm sitting here thinking, so then the people pleaser, as your employee and the people pleaser side of me takes all of those ideas though. And I'm like, oh, she really means this. I take them at face value and I'm like, okay, well, let's make sure we're moving on it then to please that idea and to honor that genius of invention. But hearing that in itself helps me even recognize then, all right, give some time and some space and we'll come to this conclusion together, not necessarily take it and run with it every time.
It just has to be given the space to be born, or whatever.
That freedom and flexibility.
Yeah. But then when it's like, well, we're doing this, I'm like, cool. I'm on, because I step into that activator role. But just given the freedom to invent.
Okay.
So I'm curious, has there ever been a time when you had been inventing so many different options that will paralyze you sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I value discernment. That's why when somebody is just like, stop, I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, like literally.
You can breathe in.
I can, exactly. Because I feel like until somebody's taking action, we're still trying to come up with an idea, and so until I see movement, I'm going to keep creating.
Sure. So talk about in all of those creations, and I think I even posed this question to Dewey last week, but using that genius of invention, has there ever been a time where, can you tell us a story about that genius of invention really leading to a unique or groundbreaking breakthrough for you in your space? Any ideas, groundbreaking ideas?
Probably the most pivotal space I remember was I had just come off that job that was soul crushing, the park in this space and put your chair here. And I just
constraints, all those constraints.
Oh my gosh. So many. And I was like, you're not using me, you're not. And so I left my job and I didn't have another job.
Can I ask though, did you feel immediately better?
Oh,
even though you didn't have a job to go to?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because I also believe like I'm going to be okay. But I did in that space, I created in my mind, and I don't know, if you want to call it a manifestation, but I created in my mind like the perfect job for Ray. Like Absolutely. And I still have the piece of paper. Everything I'm good at, I love to do, I want to do, and all the things I didn't anymore.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, which ones are those maybe negotiable and which is a deal breaker? And then I really set my mind into finding the job that meet that list. And so I created it and I visualized it, and oh my gosh.
You found it. Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Like, I remember sitting in that interview, and it was all of MTI at the time was in the interview. And I think Alan, our former director, he said, well, why should we hire you? Or, the typical kind. And I slammed my fist on the table and I said, I was built for this. Like, you have no idea, and I mean, that's all I could think of to say. I didn't have a practiced, a comeback or anything. I was like, oh, how can you not see it? And then we went down and auditioned, and I loved it because they sat here, and over there in the audience. They spread out. So I had a big stage.
So tell me, as we're thinking through, because Invention takes a lot of energy and brain space. And so is there like a process for you when you're coming up with all of these ideas or these solutions? Do you have any particular like techniques or habits?
Well, probably my less refrained approach is talking it out. But that's not always appropriate. We're at a meeting, or it's not my turn to talk, or, nobody's asked me for an idea, and so I do write a lot of notes. I write all the time, because that interrupting, in order to like spout that invention isn't always appropriate. And so I write, and then I do. That's how complex
I'm just
it is.
wondering, there has to be part of a visioning process, I would think, with this idea of invention, right? So does your mind see pictures?
Yes.
Do you constantly are operating in images and
Yes.
pictures and what that end result might look like?
Yes.
And oh, wow. Because when you talked about words and writing things down, I was
yeah.
like, are you auditory? Are you more visual in your thinking and
Yeah.
that kind of thing?
Yeah. No, I'm very visual, but I want to capture it because they come so fast.
Ah,
And so I have to write them down. And then you go back and you go, what? what
It made
meeting
sense
were
to me
you
earlier.
in? Yeah, it was like brilliant at the moment. But, that's part of the freedom, that I have. But I can look at something literally and just like create a whole, like, is that going to work or not going to work? How's it going to work? Who's it going to work with?
And so is it helpful then, when we think about a lot of the conversations we have, and you mentioned it's good to talk it out loud, we do a lot of that here on our team. But if we come with the actual visual examples, like I think of when we've redone like our supervisory certificate series, and I'm sitting in the room with you and I have like a design presented to you, or is that helpful to really kind of honor that space of visualization for you? Or is that actually constraining in itself because now you don't get to create it?
No, because I think at that level, I'm already done with it.
Okay. Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
So how do you handle, because I'm thinking here, and we've talked about how this constraint is kind of crushing to you, but there's going to be times you're sitting in meetings and there's going to be skepticism about different inventions or ideas or things that you're coming up with. So how do you kind of handle that? How do you regulate kind of the emotions that maybe come with that?
I don't know. Do
I?
You regulate very well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hyper sensitive to how I impact the room. And that's from great mentoring and some tough conversations. But I reconcile it in my head as they just don't get it. So it's more of an inner conversation. Like, I would never say that out loud.
Sure,
but, in order for my mind to like let it go, I reconcile, well, they just don't get it. And that's fine.
Maybe they'll get it tomorrow.
Yeah. Or, I'll be on to something else. That's the other thing. I'll be on to something else. Because whatever they come back with, I can ideate from that.
Yeah.
I know there's still there's still action to be had.
I'll say this too. I think you're pretty strategic when you're communicating with people.
Yeah.
I've seen that over and over. You read the audience very, very well, and you can tell when people are kind of on board with you, or you're like, yeah. I think you can tell that pretty easily.
Yeah. I love a challenge.
Yeah.
So to that point, actually, I'm going to lean into that a little bit. Are there any obstacles then that you kind of you encounter that you have to try and overcome to really honor and to operate out of this genius of invention more?
Well, a lot like wonder, which Dewey, has a genius in, the unwillingness to evolve, and to explore either a new opportunity or, we've always done it that way, or we don't do that here kind of thing. I'm just like, oh, you poor person, like, I'm like, oh, but again, that's kind of an internal dialogue. Sure. So the we don't do that sort of thing here.
That's the biggest obstacle then. Yeah. I'm thinking, because you even touched on it earlier. Obviously, we know like there's a point in your brain can just continue to create. And there's a point then where we're moving and we're getting ready to move out of that ideation stage into the stage of work that's that activation stage. So the idea is down and we're getting ready to move. How do you balance the need for that creativity with the point of implementation, the time constraints that come with implementation or just resources, execution components?
That's the validation of the creative part.
Okay.
Is the actually executing. So even if it's not my idea, I mean, if somebody's taking a movement forward, then that's freedom. Like that's choice. That's movement. So that action is very validating in the process.
That explains a lot to me.
Yeah,
does it?
About you, yeah, because you got these great ideas, and when you do start to see them come to fruition, that could be very validating. So, but it explains a hell of a lot to me about your need to activate, right?
Yeah.
Your need to get these ideas because you see the value in them. You see the benefit that they bring. That's genius.
It is. It's your genius, right? Well, and I'm sitting here. I don't know, Dewey, what went through your mind with that, but there was one particular idea that you invented while we were in the basement of Witten Hall, where you'd said to me, like, Brianna, I think we should do a podcast. And I was like, and how long did it take for us to finally come to terms with doing the podcast? And we did it, and you're like, yay! Like, there was just this energy. It was great because you'd seen that idea come to
yeah,
life.
but man, how much did I need you? Like I love that, coming up with it, but then and getting started and getting excited and getting everybody excited, and then I was like, okay, tell me when to show up.
What's next?
Yeah. So like totally, you've got to get to that other level of implementation.
So let me ask you, though, because I know that we are seeing, and, we talked last week about how the genius of wonder is one of the lower geniuses as far as represented among those who've taken the 6 types of working genius assessment. And so right behind that is invention. And it's still, and this was as of December, so it actually was about 13% also of the population that's taken the assessments has this. So we're not seeing a whole lot of it in the workplaces like we used to. So how do we create an environment? So as a leader, as someone with the genius of invention, how do we create that environment that really fosters the genius of invention?
Well, for me, it's Dewey, honestly, because he asks a lot of questions, right? I mean, questions you don't even know need to be asked. He's asking them, but that's the spark, so it that partnering in that space. Definitely being in a place, if you're managing, if you're leading somebody with an invention, giving them the expectations of freedom, like where are their boundaries and what they can do and what they can't do, and extending those. But I think also trusting the process that they have. I know you last week had talked about, I'm going to get there. I might take a few detours, and kind of the same with invention, like, because there's so many, and so something will make sense.
Well, it's very interesting that you kind of talked about, I can invent as long as I know what the boundaries are. Right. And I think that we often move into let's face it, every organization has policies, it has rules,
Sure.
Right.
things that limit that freedom. But I think that you can even have that and still have that freedom, because as long as you know the boundaries.
Well,
right? Because then you can account for them, right? And you can
here's how I manage that in my mind. Like, there's so much stuff you can do with cotton, but it has its boundaries. It has things that it's best for. And then there are some things that spandex is better for. And so, again, you work within the boundaries of the fabric that you have. That's kind of in my mind what happens. So am I working with cotton? Am I working with spandex? Am I working with wool? Like, ooh, that's the real serious stuff. Like, that's how my mind. Yeah. I'm very, that's weird. I know.
No, it's not.
I don't think it's weird at all, but it just
No.
makes a lot more sense to me,
It does.
about you now.
It does. So beyond just kind of creating the workplace that really allows for that space of invention, what advice do you have for folks who are intentionally trying to tap into it a little bit more? So maybe it's not their genius, a competency, or a frustration. What should they do? What are some routines or habits that might help them?
There's one activity that we used to do back in the 1900s called the archaeological dig. Do you remember that? And okay, yes. And, it was taking an object, a picture of an object, and then you had to come up with multiple uses for it. So you get a bowling ball.
Yeah.
Right. And just kind of working through the exercise of what else could that bowling ball be, and giving, because I think you're building different pathways, and so you got to use that neuro pathway more and more and more, so it's not just a bumpy, uncharted road, get it to where it's gravel, then get it to where, like pea gravel, that kind of thing. So that to me is a really good thing. Like, I can do it very easily, but I think if somebody's trying to develop it, I love that exercise for that reason.
It's a good one. It was one of my favorites when you first did it too.
Yeah.
Yes. Being intentional with finding new ways of doing things each day. Absolutely. So thinking about your leadership style, right? So we're kind of making all these connections here. And immediately when I think of your leadership style and your decision making, I'm constantly, as your employee, always looking at how did I change this, or how am I doing something new in a way for this? Talk about how your genius of invention really influences that style and influences the way in which you're making decisions.
Well, I'm definitely not afraid of change.
Right.
So I like new things. I'm pretty much comparatively the risk taker. And so I want to go first. Don't worry, I got you. Like, I literally believe that I can carry that, so stepping out first, taking the chance, taking the hits, maybe bringing back new information, like, that's not going to work, or it'll work if we do this, those kinds of things. So I think in my leadership style, that's kind of like, put me out there. I'll be that litmus test, and I'll come back and, bring the intel. Yeah.
I like, and I certainly see that. I mean, you are the first
absolutely.
to always raise your hand for us to try anything new.
I know.
But you are also the one to, and I really feel it, you and Dewey both, to have the backs, our back, if things just aren't going exactly how.
I will fight till the end.
Yes. Yeah. I feel that. I do feel that. And so tell me about, and this is just personally, as we're getting ready to wrap up here, there is a reward, right? When you're thinking of obviously it can be exhausting sometimes to have so many new ideas and to keep going, but there's a reward to it in having that genius of invention. What do you find most rewarding about it, and why?
Wow. Just being different.
Mm-hmm.
Again.
And just for you all out there, Ray is often being different.
Yes.
I mean, she comes in
I
the
don't even
office
know
every
I am.
day and it's a different hairstyle.
Yes, that is true.
It's and you love that idea of being different. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I would wear something new to school, and I used to write down everything I'd wear. And if somebody copied it, I was done with it. It was off the list.
Wow.
Interesting.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. Like, that was part of my freedom, was being the only person that was doing it. But, of course, my mom was always, well, imitation is the highest form of flattery. I'm like, not to an inventor. But I could turn it into a business, obviously.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so as we start wrapping this up, I guess what would be any final key takeaways you'd want to leave our listeners with as we're thinking, whether it's really harnessing this genius and appreciating it, accepting it, leaning into it, or even the other side for the team members, in ensuring we're complementing it and giving you what you need in that space.
Yeah. Similar to Wonder, there's a actual time element that needs to be allowed for it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me as an external processor, it usually needs to be in the presence of other people, right? Because those ideas don't matter if they're not out here as an extrovert. So there's that element of just time, just let her go, and she'll get there. And don't write down anything.
Which has gotten us in trouble in the past because I immediately had this happened. One time I was on a gig. I was driving back to Columbia. I think I was in St. Joe and I called Ray. And we got to talking and we got to outline. And this was her invention. You could just see the wheels just turn. I was asking questions and she's like, yeah, we could do this. We could do this. And essentially what we did is in about 45 minutes or an hour on the road conversation, we mapped out a whole leadership development program.
Literally.
And that was, but we were both driving. So none of us wrote it down.
Right.
And it was genius.
It was. And we go back to that story many times because it was. He was asking all the right questions. We were just in the right headspace.
I'd ask the questions and she's like, and we can do this, and we can do this, and we can do this.
Yep. And then we're like, wow, why didn't we write that down? I don't even know if we had phones that recorded at the time. It was so long ago. But I'll write stuff down, but
no one else.
Wait for for 2.0.
Okay. Right. Oh, this is good. Well, Dewey, any thoughts? I want to tap into that a little bit as you kind of lead this genius of invention. Any considerations or thoughts for leading somebody effectively who has this genius?
The first thing I'd say is to get out of their way. Give them the space and the flexibility and the freedom they need to think about that. I would also encourage you to just keep asking them questions, as a way to get them to even think even more. This is, to me, also about continuous improvement. Ray's got great inventions. Oftentimes it might not be a brand new thing, but it's about inventing something that makes something we already have even better.
Right.
And just give them the space. Give them the space they need to invent.
Mm-hmm.
And the tools they need, right? You want to make sure that they have the resources to be able to do that as well.
Lots of chart paper.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of chart paper. There's chart paper in my office right now, right? From our conversation this morning. So, I appreciate you letting us tap into your genius, right?
Thanks for listening.
I loved it.
I did too. And
I learned even more today.
I did too. I did too. That's this is actually, so we talked about this already as a team, but this is almost like the 2.0 of coming back in as a team and talking about it individually, almost interviewing each other. And I'm finding this incredibly valuable. Yeah. So listeners, we hope you are too. Let us know if you've got questions, comments. Maybe you resonate with this genius as well and have some other thoughts and considerations. Send them to us, mti@missouri.edu. Next week, we are going to be heading into the third genius from the 6 types, and that's the genius of discernment. So we're making that transition from the ideation into now the activation stage of work. And so we will talk all about the genius of discernment represented by Dewey and myself on our team here. And so tune in for it next week. And until then,
go be great.
And that's a wrap, folks. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Weekly Workplace. We hope you've been inspired, equipped, and ready to tackle whatever challenges come your way. But before you go, remember, the journey to success never stops. Keep grinding, keep growing, and keep striving for greatness. And hey, if you want to stay ahead of the game and never miss an episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you thought of today's show. Your feedback fuels our fire. Also, show us some love. love by liking and sharing this podcast with your friends, colleagues, and fellow go-getters. Together, let's spread the knowledge and empower more professionals to reach their full potential. For even more tools and resources to elevate your career, check out the Missouri Training Institute. So until next time, keep hustling, keep learning, and keep dominating the workplace.